according to the American Cancer Society, you're a survivor as soon as you're diagnosed. But there's this whole portion of the world that says as long as you're undergoing treatment, you are a warrior. Then you become a survivor. And there was a part of me that loved that warrior identity, given what I do. There's another part of me, it's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting in a chair while chemo does all the work. How am I a warrior?
That's not true.
People would say to me, you're so brave going through this. And I wouldn't call them out, but I felt like saying, well, do I have a choice, right? I don't really have a choice. Like, this was given to me. This is the treatment. I can curl up in a ball, I suppose. But I don't feel brave, and I didn't always feel like a warrior.
Hey, pod people. Welcome to this week's episode of
Why Do People Do That?
We are excited to introduce our guest who is here with us today. I saw this book and I talked to Heather about it, and we just felt it was really such an important topic and really important to have you on here to talk about this story. So this is Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds, who is the CEO of an organization here on Long Island. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure, I can do that. First off, thank you so much for having me. Love being here. We'll have a good time. And have a really great conversation. So I have the privilege of running Family and Children's Association. I've been there for a little over 11 years, but the organization has been around for 141 years. So I haven't been there that entire time, although sometimes it feels like it and I look like it. But the organization started here on Long Island really as a one-room orphanage before Nassau County was even Nassau County. So we're the oldest not-for-profit on Long Island. And we've since grown to include more than 50 programs that run the lifespan, everything from a nursery school in the village of Hempstead to senior programs and everything in between. Got 13 locations across Long Island. We stay on Long Island. We don't go into New York City, but from the Queens border on out to the East End. In any given year, last year we served about 37,000 people. This year that number will be even bigger, especially given some of the issues our region is facing. And I'm lucky to have 360 really, really, really dedicated and committed staff.
Wow.
So before we get into your book, which I'm excited to do, real quick about the organization that you are running. That was actually my internship when I was in social work school 30 years ago. It was my first internship when I was getting my bachelor's in social work. I was over at Nassau Haven, which is for those of you who don't know, it's a runaway and homeless shelter for children ages 16 to 21. That was an amazing experience. I still remember it. I remember a lot of the kids I worked with. I wonder sometimes where they are today. But it really is, just from, personal experience, I could tell you that is such an amazing organization, such important work. And I feel lucky to have had my first learning experience as a social worker at your organization.
So all things come full circle. We still run Nassau Haven. Unfortunately, one of the trends that we've seen over the course of the past 10 or 15 years is the number of trafficked children that are coming into that house. And so when there are crackdowns on Queens Boulevard, kids either scatter to the west or they scatter to the east. And so we've seen a lot of young women in particular scatter east. And so I would say about a third of the folks we take in now are kids who are trafficked. So just a sign of the times. But highlights the need for really good people to be there when that young woman finally decides to knock on the door. You want that response to be impeccable and warm and compassionate and skilled and professional each and every time. And I think we have that. So I'm glad you have a history there.
Yeah, I do. And it really, I think, speaks to how much the times have changed, because when I was there, that was not who was knocking on the door. It was children coming from, abuse and, family contention and conflict.
We still all have that. We didn't fix that problem.
I'm sure. I mean, I don't know that we're ever going to, but at least there's people there to help.
Absolutely.
Which is so important. But we could talk about that all day, but I'd like to get to your book. So that aside, Every Mile Matters. I'm going to just hold this up here for the viewers, not the listeners, just so that you can kind of see it.
Stacey holding book.
Stacey holding. For the listeners. So, cancer, right? This is your personal story with cancer. Is something that hits so many people in our world, not just here on Long Island, obviously, but everywhere, across the world. I think that there's probably not one person, unfortunately, that doesn't have a story either personally for themselves or somebody that they know, a family member or friend. And so what really stood out for me in your story is that it is one of resilience and, having been diagnosed with cancer twice, which is tough,
Yes.
being diagnosed with cancer
Once is bad enough.
is hard, but now 2 times, and, Heather and I personally do know a few people who have, gone that journey as well. And it can really be so devastating to go through and come out the other side just to have it happen again. And I think that for a lot of people, being able to be resilient in the face of something that is so hard or so scary is very, very difficult and hard to navigate. So I'd love for you to kind of just tell us in your own words, right? Just from the start, a little bit about what that was like for you, where you really find your resilience journey and what drove you to write this book.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
So 2 million Americans a year will hear the words, you have cancer. And so it's gotten increasingly common. I think screening is better too. And so that means that more people will know and be able to learn their diagnosis a little bit sooner. My journey started at 10:43 a.m. on April 1st of 2022. I'm heading down the Northern State Parkway to a dental appointment on Route 110.
Yeah.
I get a notification on my phone. I would never text and drive. And so when I get to the light, I log into the NYU Lingo and Health Portal, and I scroll through pages of medical jargon that I really don't understand. And then I get to the punchline, and it says clinically significant prostate cancer likely. And I'm just blown away.
Yeah.
Cars beeping behind me, that kind of thing. I'm like, this has to be a lousy April Fool's joke. They must have messed my record up with somebody else's. This can't be the case.
Disbelief. Right.
And to be fair, my cancer journey didn't start that day. It started a couple of weeks earlier with a routine physical. I had 0 symptoms whatsoever, went in for routine physical. I exercise a lot, which we'll get to. And so I got regular checkups all the time. My doctor says to me, look, your PSA level is a little bit high. It's 4.2. The norm is 4.0. We're going to check this out a little bit more. And I'm like, well, I rode the Peloton this morning, which can elevate your PSA level. Do you think it could be that? And he said, well, ordinarily, yes, but it's twice what it was 2 years ago. So you get spun into this world and you flail about until you get the news. And so I got the news, processed it, kind of went through all of the stages of grief that you go through. I felt like I cycled through them like 10 times in a day and then had to start over again and that kind of thing. But I was lucky enough to find a really good oncologist in July of that year, July 4th weekend, Independence Day. I got surgery, got rid of cancer. One of the things that immediately came to mind as I settled into that diagnosis and mapped out the treatment plan was in November of that year, I had done Ironman Florida. An Ironman race, for people who don't know, who think that's really just a comic book character, is an event where you swim 2.4 miles in open water, you do a 112-mile bike ride, and then you run a full 26.2-mile marathon. If you don't complete that in under 17 hours, you're disqualified.
That's insane. Let's just pause there for a second, because that's insane. Any one of those events independently is impressive, but to be able to do all 3 of them is just
I couldn't even run up my block.
You do them back to back in rapid succession, and it's an illness. So I went through. I did the race. I got kind of at the end. The crowning achievement is, yes, the medal that everybody else gets and the free banana and that kind of thing. But it's also you get proclaimed an Ironman, and that is meaning that I'll tell you about later. But as I got into the diagnosis, I'm like, so wait a minute. Like, I do hard things, right? I did that. I trained for that. You don't just pick up your bike and do that. So you train for it, and there's some really ugly moments out there. I was out there for 15 hours and 9 minutes. There's some really ugly moments where you're arguing with yourself. And so you have to get through some really, really tough times. And I'm like, well, so wait, I did Ironman Florida with cancer. I can do this. This is cancer. And so I went through, got the treatment in July. Everything was good. I hassled my oncologist and said, how quickly can I run? He's like, yeah, like 2 months. I said, well, what happens if I do it sooner? He said, well, you're going to cause damage and I'm going to have to reoperate. So I set my sights. My comeback was the New York City Marathon that year. So I had surgery in July, ran the New York City Marathon the first weekend of November. Not my fastest time, but I got it done. And I'm like, so I'm back. I'm good. Get into 2023. I'm now an evangelist for routine testing. I did a commercial for the Prostate Cancer Foundation of America. It's run in hockey stadium everywhere. So at least once a week, somebody hits me up and says, I saw you on a commercial. But I became like really, excited about the prospect of early detection and that kind of thing. And, was telling anyone who would listen, I had no symptoms. I was fine. If this had gone untreated, it would have been a very, very different outcome.
Such an important message.
So I became an evangelist for that. So I went and got a colonoscopy like you're supposed to do in August of that following year. Do the prep, have the colonoscopy, wake up, doctor comes to me, and, I'll never forget his demeanor. And he's like, so I found a couple polyps. And then there's this pause, and I'm like, is there an and? Right? And he's like, and I found a significant mass. And the only thing I think of to ask was, well, how significant?
Right, what is significant?
Right. And he's like,
mass?
It's very significant. And he's like, you should get a referral to a surgeon on the way out the door. And so I get out into the waiting room. My now wife, then girlfriend, is in the waiting room. And she's like, what? I'm like, it's not good. And then I say to the receptionist, I guess I need a referral to a surgeon. She's like, okay. Like, what kind of? I'm like, I don't know. Go talk
for
to him.
Significant mass.
Right.
Not for you.
And then, you walk out, I'll never forget, you walk out into the bright sun, everything, it's August, it's hot out, you're starving, and you're like, what just happened to me? Mm-hmm. And so it wound up being stage 3B colorectal cancer. I know the way this works. So I'm like, 3B is precariously close to stage 4.
Yeah.
And,
scary.
Found a great oncologist. There's a gap in time between when you get the diagnosis and the time you actually start treatment. And that's like a valley. You're just in this place wondering, so what happens now? Where do we go with this? What happens?
So much uncertainty.
Yeah.
And you're Googling and falling down rabbit holes, I'm sure.
So that's a train wreck. And so, and fortunately, ChatGPT was not really a thing a couple of years ago. But yes, I Googled everything. I joined chat boards, which is, look, it's like Yelp reviews, right? Colorectal cancer, would never recommend. And so, so wound up.
Don't get it, people.
Right, avoid it. So wound up with some really good healthcare professionals at NYU Langone, not far from where we're doing this. And the game plan was 27 rounds of radiation, 27 rounds of chemo, a small treatment break, and then chemo infusions every other week for 6 months. And so that was an adventure in so many ways. And I will say, one of the things I was really able to do, was to parallel it with my training. I couldn't train anymore. Yeah. And for people who run or exercise religiously, you'll understand that when you stop doing that every morning, it's like stopping any other drug. The dopamine rush has stopped. And so typically before you do a big marathon, you taper for 10 days out. And like the last week you barely run, I crawl out of my skin because I'm so used to that routine. And so used to the time alone and so used to the dopamine rush.
Part of how you regulate yourself.
Right. So the exercise drops out, but I was able to draw a lot of parallels with treatment. So I'm part of a clinical trial. It's a national clinical trial. I got a much higher dose of chemo than other people would get. The standard is 2 drugs. I got 3 drugs. And I'll say my fitness going into this was like money in the bank. Because they said, we think you can handle the 3 drugs. We think emotionally you can manage it because the side effects are going to be a lot worse. But physically, you can manage it better. So for all my friends who are like, wait a minute, aren't you an Ironman or something? Like, how did you get cancer twice, right? The big difference between health and fitness. They're 2 really, really different things. You could be the most fit person in the world and still have a health complication.
Yeah, so if I could pause you just to talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
People like to think there's a formula to safety, right? Yeah. If I am fit, if I am healthy, if I eat the right things, if I exercise, if I do all the right things, bad things won't happen. And so when people hear, right, that somebody who is able to do
Ironman.
right? Like literally like an Ironman. You're able to do this thing that most humans can't even watch somebody else do and feel okay, right? I think it scares people. It's like, wow, if this could happen to you, what does that mean for me? And I think it really triggers a lot of fears, uncertainty, feeling out of control, worry. And so now what you have on top of, I don't even know if you realized it, you probably did because you're smart. So I'm sure you knew. I think that on top of having to worry about yourself and take care of yourself, there now is this responsibility of everyone's looking at me like I'm this rock. And I'm supposed to be okay. So I have to be okay, not just for me, but for everybody that's looking at me and saying, oh my God, you got this, right? You have to have this because if you don't have this, I'm going to be scared. Right?
You nailed it. I'm glad you went there. You know, it was hard at first because I would have people, like so much of my identity was built around triathlon. And I'd see people at morning meetings and they'd be like 7 a.m. meetings and they'd be like, you probably already ran 10 miles, right? And, you know, I really wrestled with that because at some point I wasn't able to. And like sometimes I would get off easy and just say, I got some health things, so I can't do it the same way that I did before. Other times I would say, I have cancer, I have to go for chemo, and so I can't run kind of thing, and send them down the road.
Awkward.
Right. But so much of my identity was built around that. The other thing that I did, and I know you'll get this, I was at work every day when I had radiation by 8 o'clock, right? So I joined a clinical trial, and for a lot of reasons. A, it gave me the best possible outcome. B, if things didn't work out, at least I helped other people. But probably the most important thing was it leveled the playing field between me and my doctors, right? They needed me as much as I needed them. Calculated thought process, right? Crazy as it sounds, but I'm like, we just leveled the playing field.
You need to be doing for others.
Right. So when they said to me, you're coming for radiation every day at 2:30 in the middle of the day, I said, no, I'm not. I'm coming at 7. We don't really open until 7. Cool. I'll be your first patient. And I was at my office every day by like 7:30, 7:45. I didn't take a single moment off from work. In fact, I probably worked harder to prove to everybody else, see, I'm not sick, and to prove to myself I'm not sick. There's a reference in the book about the cancer card. And in retrospect, now I almost wish like I had played the cancer card more often. I'm like, the perfect excuse not to go to that event. I had cancer, for heaven's sakes. And I never used it.
It's just reality.
Right. And I never used it because I was so hell bent on proving to the world, no, I'm good and I'm gonna be good.
Why was that so important?
What would it mean if you weren't good?
Yeah, you know, I think it was the fear piece of it. You know, look, there were points along this journey where I'm like, I could die from this, right? I never thought I was going to die from prostate cancer. I'm like, people get it all the time, and very few people actually die from it. I can name the ones who have, because you do that when you have it. But this was a whole different ballgame. And in my medical chart at one point in time, it said, you know, client has been counseled about the risk of mortality. And I'm like, well, I actually wasn't, but but now that you tell me,
because nobody wants to talk about it,
right? And so I really had to wrestle with that. There's an entire chapter in the book about how cancer changes you spiritually. It was the hardest part to write. The beginning came easy, the end came easy. The middle part was really challenging because until you get a diagnosis like this, there's things that you think you've resolved in your mind that you really haven't resolved. Like you've touched on it. Like, what do I believe about God and a higher power? What do I believe? What do you go from? What do I want my legacy to be? What will my legacy be? Past tense.
Yeah.
There was a point along the way. It was soon after I started treatment. Wife was very supportive. I have tons of friends, a community wrapped around me. All the support a person can want. I've got the best access to healthcare in the world. Look, I'm white, middle class, heterosexual, well insured, live on Long Island, best access to care. And the disparities are worth talking about too. But the best access to care, and I'm like, I still feel alone. Well, why do I feel alone? Because I'm face to face with my own soul at points in time and having to wrestle with questions that you typically don't wrestle with until end of life.
Right.
And as I'm wrestling with them, I'm like, all right, is this the natural end of life process that's occurring to me? And so I had to wrestle with some of those things. I don't know that I fully resolved them, but I did have to struggle with some of that stuff that we all think we got it worked out in terms of what we believe, what does life after this look like? Those are the kind of places you go during this process. I wouldn't trade it. So there are people who say, cancer is a gift. That's crap. Cancer is no gift. Let me tell you, it is no gift.
People like to find silver linings when things are hard, right? That's their way for resilience. But that didn't work for you.
No, it doesn't. But it also, I will tell you that there's some things that came out of it that were really unexpected and that really are gifts, including my ability to share it out to the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is absolutely a gift to be able to say, I did this. But I think that allowing yourself to be vulnerable, right, which you're speaking about in a way that you're able to admit it was hard. Yeah. And there was an avoidance of it. And part of that showing up for work every day and saying, I have to show everybody that I'm okay. Part of it was wanting to avoid your own vulnerability, right? Because if everyone sees me as being okay, then that must mean I'm okay.
Right.
And I have to be okay, right? And so it was this projection outward that, was then coming back at you that you can internalize. And that's probably part of what kept you going, this relationship that you had with other and this reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Through how others were looking at you. And if I can keep showing up and being that guy who's here and available and working and running things and they can still count on me, then I'm still okay. And it sounds like, because that was tied into your identity, that is probably part of the legacy that you were kind of circling around wanting to leave behind, right? Like, who do I want to be remembered as? What do I want to do? What have I not done yet?
It forces you to take that inventory and, so look, that's to leave your audience kind of in limbo. So I went through treatment. The treatment was successful. We knew that after the first round of treatment, and then I had kind of the heavy round of chemo, one of the things that was very, very eye-opening, and folks that have experienced kind of the cancer journey will understand this. You ring the bell at the end of treatment. Big bell hanging in the hallway, you ring the bell, it signifies the end of treatment, that kind of thing. I rang it twice, actually. Once with the first round of treatment. I'm like, but I'm not done. I still have like 8 chemo infusions. And they're like, no, but this phase is done. You should ring it. I'm like, all right, I'll ring it. The second time I rang it, I knew what I was in for and knew a little bit more about it. And I'll tell you, it felt weird ringing the bell because I'm like, I look around the infusion room and half of us are going to do really well and live to appear on podcasts and things like that. The other half were not doing so well. People who it didn't look good from what I could see. And I'm like, here I'm ringing the bell and half these people won't finish treatment, or they're finishing treatment understanding that it wasn't successful.
It's so hard to celebrate.
And so that guilt around, that survivor's guilt, right? And we see it in other spaces, was a big thing. But the other thing is when you finish treatment, you think, oh, it's like a Hallmark card. I'm all done. This is great. Woohoo, I'm finished. Chemo is cumulative. And so that all kicks in when you're done, and your side effects are at their worst when you're done. The 30 days after chemo ends is really the roughest point in time, and chemo gets progressively hard over time. My first infusion, I ate pizza. Like the nurse is walking by me like, there's something wrong with you, right? By the end, I wasn't eating pizza. The other thing that resonates, and you'll get this, is the term they use when the cancer is gone is that you have no evidence of disease. And I always found that really ironic because I'm like, cancer leaves behind plenty of evidence, and so does the treatment.
Yeah.
And some of that is the side effects associated with chemo. It's the neuropathy, it's just ongoing side effects that never leave you, but there's other side effects too. And some of those really good side effects are things like gratitude and a new appreciation, a new understanding, more introspection than maybe you had before. And so the journey isn't over. And then in case you need a reminder, when this happens to you, you go for regular scans. And so every 3 months, I'm going for CAT scans, MRIs, that kind of thing. Visiting with my doctor because I am part of the clinical trial. And so if you need a booster shot of gratitude, you get that because you go to the same place where you were treated. You drive into the same dark parking garage. You walk through the hallway that smells and feels exactly the same. You see all the nurses that were there when you had your port in and had a poorly fitting gown on. and it brings you right back there. And then you get a positive test result. The good thing is you get test results instantly these days, so you don't have to wait.
You don't have to find them in your car sitting at a light.
Right. But you struggle with this anxiety. You know, one cancer survivor described it as, you know, when you go for the scans, it's like spinning the roulette wheel. You land on black, you're good. You land on red, you're right back to cancer land. You know, IV poles and
Speaking of which, I'm wondering, you know, being that this is, why do people do that? And one of the things we like to focus on is people and how they handle things and you know, where their minds go and why they do the things they do. I'm wondering if going to the doctors and getting the scans feels different for you now, having had cancer twice. Is there a belief system or a shift in your mind in terms of mortality or vulnerability that makes it harder or scarier? Or is it more in the other direction where you feel more resilient, or that you feel safer, that you feel like, I got this? You know, what has it done for you, and what kind of shift do you see, and how do you handle that?
I think it's a little bit of both. You know, I've already worked through in my mind 1,000 times, what am I going to do if cancer comes back?
Yeah.
Right? Nothing I can do about that. And in fact, you know, here's the biggest thing in the world. You know, there's a direct connection between the level of stress in your body and your likelihood of developing cancer or some other disease. That's not to say that stress itself causes cancer. There's a whole bunch of things that go into the equation. But generally, stress is directly related to cancer. And I'm like, so if I get stressed out about having cancer again, I'm basically creating a scenario where cancer can thrive.
So unfair.
Yeah. So I've worked through in my mind 1,000,000 times what will happen. In fact, right before the book came out on August 8th, which was the anniversary of my the 2-year anniversary of my diagnosis. I woke up 3 nights before the book came out and thought to myself, suppose, and I had a test like the next day. I'm like, if the cancer comes back, what do we have to do about the book? The book is written. The book is done. The book is finished. If I find that I have cancer tomorrow and the book is supposed to come out 2 days later, what is it? How do I manage that? And I'd already kind of thought, well, I'll write an epilogue and whatever else. But that's where your mind goes. And I will say it goes there on a temporary basis. And then you just, so look, if it comes back, I will get treatment again. If the treatment works,
I'm hearing acceptance.
then thank you. Right. So, and as long as it doesn't, you have the gratitude that it didn't come back. I mean, you're really, really grateful for good test results. And, you know, back on the spiritual piece, I'm not a spiritual person. And everybody around me was saying to me, I'm praying for you every day. There's a part of me that was like, I'm not even praying for myself. What does that mean? Right? They're doing all this work and I'm doing nothing. And then when I run off for a test and I say a quick, you know, prayer, I'm like, well, this feels opportunistic, right? Do me a favor now. And so those are the types of things you struggle with. But the triathlon parallel comes in, you know, the kind of mindset around triathlon is it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to suck. No matter what you do, being on the bike for that long, running that long is lousy. I had done 15 marathons before that. And there's a place in marathon running where you're at like mile 18. So you're far in, you've been running for a couple hours. You're not close enough where you're finished by any stretch of the imagination. And we call it the wall. And literally your legs feel like cement and your brain and the rest of your body is arguing. Why are you doing this? This is the dumbest thing you've ever done.
And that's
you should
just
stop.
listen to my body. Like,
right.
and you're saying, he's like, you're running for a few hours. And I'm like, that's where you lost me. Like, that's.
I run for a minute and I'm like, okay, that's it till next year.
I'll see you held up. But part of doing it is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
This is uncomfortable. It sucks. It's lousy. Acknowledge it and move on. Just keep going. And it's honestly the skills I used to get through treatment. My oncologist, we were partway into the 8 infusions. And at this point, like the tail end of a very long treatment regimen. And he's said to me, you know, your blood counts are diminishing. I might have to put you in the hospital. I'm like, that's not going to happen. And he's like, I'm tempted to stop at 6 because the side effects are mounting up. All of the data says that as long as we get 6 in, we're good. And if we go further, we're increasing the likelihood of permanent side effects. And he's like, I don't think you're going to want to do that though, right? And I said, there is zero chance that's happening. If I have to go buy chemo on the street to finish this, that's what I'm going to do. And so we finished, we did it. But I will tell you, and the book is about how triathlon training really helped me with the mindset. It's not that it toughens you up, although it does. It's the acceptance of pain. It's the acceptance of that uncomfortability. It's understanding that, yeah, I'm uncomfortable now doing this, but the wheels really aren't falling off. I'm going to be okay through all of this. And so, I think everybody's cancer journey is different. I mentioned chemo a lot in our discussion. And I will say that there are folks in the cancer world who are like, well, if I didn't have chemo, then my experience isn't the same as yours. It's not the same as mine, but it's no less than mine. And then when I was first diagnosed with prostate cancer, I reached out to a close friend of mine who is an MD, and he's like, you're going to be fine. That's not even like a real cancer. I'm like, well, it kind of feels real to me.
That's what it is.
And there are a lot of people who said to me, you're going to be fine. And I would never do this, but every time somebody said that to me, my immediate thought was, how the hell do you know? Like, I don't know I'm going to be fine. My oncologist doesn't even know I'm fine. In fact,
invalidating.
In fact, he made me sign a release saying that I could die from something like this.
People don't know what to say.
Right. That's it. Here's the Cliff's Notes version that I always say to people when they're like, well, I don't know what to say. First, I'll say, it's fine to say, I don't know what to say, but I'm sorry this is happening. Yep. But any sentence that begins with at least, don't say it.
Yeah.
Right. So for cancer survivors who lose their hair, I wasn't that worried about it, but a lot of people are. And so people will say, well, at least you didn't lose your hair. Well, great. That's some consolation. And so, when people, will say, I'm not sure what to say to someone who has cancer, I would say, don't start any sentence with at least. Don't tell them about your Uncle Fred who took a miracle cure, out of something he bought in, at a gas station.
Yeah.
Don't tell me about your uncle who died a painful death either, because I don't want to hear that. Don't refer me to your holistic practitioner. Just be there.
Yeah.
My relationship with male friends changed a lot in all of this. And there's this, we could talk for hours about masculinity, and like I had 2 embarrassing cancers, right? And so I referred to them in a particular way, probably not appropriate for your show. But my relationship with guys changed pretty dramatically. And at one point in time, my male friends, we would have lunch and stuff, and they'd be like, I love you. And it wasn't like the drunken, 3 drinks in, slap you on the back kind of thing. It was genuine.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what to say, so sometimes I just said nothing, which was awkward. I'm like, I'll see you, pal, buddy. And then my second thought when I get into the car, I'm like, I'd look in the mirror, like the rearview mirror, and be like, does it look like I'm going to die? Like, do they think they're not going to see me again? And they thought this was like our last conversation, because I got a lot more to say than that, if it is. And I started to think, am I really that sick? And then I came around to, no, these are people who really care, and it was their opportunity. And in a lot of cases, those, and one in particular, it was actually a professor at Stony Brook and the chair of my dissertation committee. He said to me, I'd offer to go to treatment with you and sit with you during chemo, but I know you'd never take me up on that. And he was right, and I didn't. But what it said to me is sometimes people need to help for them. It's not necessarily for you. And when you kind of block people out and say, no, I got this, you're taking away from them and taking away from the opportunity to deepen relationships. So I found myself doing that, particularly with other guys. I mean, I'm one of those that I'm like, no, I don't need any help. Like, I do triathlons and stuff. I don't need help, right? It's an individual sport. I don't need help. But trying to do something like cancer by yourself is impossible. And if you think you are, you're not, right? There's a whole team of nurses that are helping you out. There's doctors, there's oncologists.
It's okay to need help.
Right.
But your identity is being the helper too. You're the CEO of FCA.
Right.
You help people.
That's right. I'm on, one side of the desk, not the other side of the desk.
It's hard to switch sides.
That's right. It's very, very hard. It feels somewhat disempowering. But you look for moments to reclaim that power, right? And so in being my own advocate, I felt like I reclaimed some of that power. But there were times that you're just forced to kind of sit back. One of the things about whether it's running, swimming, or biking, I have a triathlon coach, and she says to me, your foot, we'll run together, and she'll be like, your footsteps they sound very heavy. And I'm like, yeah, I sound like an elephant, clumping against you. She's like, you're wasting energy with your footsteps that heavy. Try to be lighter. And she weighs like 100 pounds, but she's like a gazelle. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I don't weigh 100 pounds and I'm not female. And so, but one of the things, like you could kind of pound your way through a triathlon and kind of bang the concrete and rah, rah, rah. Or you could try a more graceful approach and like glide through the water as you're swimming as opposed to splashing around frenetically.
Yeah.
You can get into a rotation on the bike where you're not mashing the pedals down. It's very smooth rotations, that kind of thing. And the same thing with running, and finding a way to kind of dial all that back and to glide through it versus stomping through it makes a huge difference. And, there too, I had to figure out, so how do I glide through this rather than simply muscling my way through each of the chemo sessions? How do I make the most of sitting in a chair for 6 hours and thinking about this?
Yep.
The way I made the most of it was I wrote a lot of the book while I was sitting there during those chemo infusion sessions.
So you couldn't just sit there and be.
No, I'd have to think about things. I'd have to do self-reflection and all that ugly kind of stuff. No, and I found myself with all the typical coping mechanisms in the office. They have to ask you your name and date of birth at least 1 million times to make sure they're not giving somebody who shouldn't have chemo.
Right.
And so I made sure to give my oncologist name every time and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They would put an IV in and I would pretend to collapse out and they'd be like, "Oh, you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine. I'm only messing with you." And so I became kind of like the infusion unit clown. And I know exactly why. And they did too. They've been on the unit for 30 plus years. But you get through it. And now, one of the things I'm trying to do is to share the experiences with folks about early detection. Again, 2 cancers, 2 years, not a single symptom whatsoever. And there's actually, some emerging data around endurance athletes and the fact that we sometimes do have symptoms that go ignored. I had two very close friends that died in the past 2 years. Both were runners. One was an endurance athlete and triathlete like myself. He died about a month and a half ago.
Sorry.
He had stage 4. And I said to him, I'm like, "I had no symptoms. Did you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I had like irregularity. I had some bleeding." He's like, "But we beat the heck out of our bodies. Like, you would expect that." I'm like, "Well, I kind of wouldn't. Like, I lose toenails and stuff like that." But you find that you wind up ignoring some of the symptoms. And recently when I went for a follow-up colonoscopy, I had somebody say to me, "Oh, it's so inconvenient and it's yucky." I'm like, "Get cancer?" I went to 88 medical appointments in 6 months with really invasive tests. You want to see uncomfortable and yucky? Take a walk with me.
Everything's relative, I guess.
And so the alternative is a lot harder.
Sure.
So, again, I think, out of these 2 experiences, and I'm almost like this when it came the second time around, I'm like, what didn't I learn the first time around? What's the message? And I'm very cognizant, right, of the old adage, 3 strikes and you're out. So I hope in the second go around, I learned everything that I need to learn. But, I've really, in writing the book, in speaking, I speak at cancer support groups a lot. I'm speaking at an ostomy support group, although I don't have one, in November, really just trying to infuse some hope into this and say, look, even with a pretty serious diagnosis, there are strategies for getting through this, and that doesn't provide you with any guarantees whatsoever. So, that's access to good care, and quite frankly, it's a little bit of luck. And so people who say, your mindset is everything, it's not. It's important, but simply willing your way out of cancer is not going to be successful.
Right. But you brought up so many really important points, which I want to kind of just highlight to make sure that no one missed it and everyone
make sure
caught it.
yeah,
And then I do have a question. Acceptance and gratitude are 2 very, very powerful pieces of getting through anything that's hard, right? Whether it be, cancer or any other kind of illness, or even just very difficult life circumstance, abuse or
Divorce,
being the victim of a crime. When we can sit in acceptance of what is hard, and we can know that even though we're going to be uncomfortable, that we can tolerate discomfort, and we can, because every hard thing we've been through in this life, if we're still sitting here, that means we've survived it.
That's right.
That means we can get through hard things. And it sounds like you learned a lot about sitting with discomfort just through your own inner dialogue when you're putting yourself through some sort of hell. Running, you know,
self-imposed,
way further than you should be running, or that you physically want to be running. You know, you've learned how to push through difficulty. You've learned how to push through uncertainty, and you've learned how to be grateful even in the face of pain and difficulty. And those are so important for anybody to take into life, whether we be talking about cancer or anything, right? And having those elements and having those be tools that you can pull out of your toolbox at any time can really help us glide through anything. Another piece I think that is important is what you brought up, is that help is okay. Even if you think you don't need it, and even if you don't need it, it's still okay to accept, right? Other people in your life love you, and they want to love you, and they want to be there for you. And so allowing them to love you and allowing them to be there for you and allowing them to give you that message is in a way helping you, and it is helping them. Which brings me to my question. You mentioned earlier that you are currently married and that at the time of your diagnosis, your wife was not your wife, she was your girlfriend. I'm wondering if you can speak to what that journey was like together, right? Obviously, you stuck through it, and here you are together, stronger, and, you know, in this next phase of your relationship. And so is there any message that you can give to us about
That's a lot of pressure on a relationship.
So it is. And so
sorry to cut you off. I'm just thinking like, wow, the guy I'm engaged to gets cancer. Like,
well, and when I got it the first time, it wasn't even an engagement. We were together 6 months. And the Friday I got diagnosed, we were actually leaving for Montauk for her birthday that weekend. And so it was a very gray, you know, April kind of weekend at Montauk, gray in so many ways. I can remember walking on the beach. But I said to her, look, you didn't sign up for this. And so if you want to bail, I completely get it. We could reconnect assuming that everything is okay, but you didn't sign up for this. And so if you want to go, no hard feelings. She's like, you lost your mind. Right?
You can't just stop caring about somebody.
Right. So, you know, she stuck through it. She actually, you know, is in a job where she runs lots and lots and lots of nursing homes. So I'm like, all right, so if things go south and I wind up in a nursing home, which just got me anyway, at least I'll wind up in a decent one. But I think it's almost harder on the person you're with than it is. I thought it was harder on her than it was on me because, like, I have all the control over everything.
So tell us about that.
You know,
that's important.
So I think it's hard to kind of go through this, and, you know, she would check out chat boards and that kind of thing and just wind up like disgusted kind of thing. I think if you go into a relationship or a marriage, whichever the case may be, in pretty good shape, then your relationship might grow. If your relationship is on the rocks or lousy going into this, it will destroy it. You're not going to get any closer. And so I think being very mindful about the other person's needs, communicating, and there were times when I'm sure I wasn't that pleasant to be around. Despite outward appearances, I'm not always this pleasant.
And that's okay.
Right.
You got to be human, right?
And she's very tolerant of that. I will tell you, she didn't miss any medical appointments. There was one appointment I went to by myself where they kind of fitted the radiation for me and that kind of thing. But other than every single infusion session, every follow-up appointment, that kind of thing, she took notes where I only heard half the thing. So when I said, didn't tell me chemo was worse after you were done, she's like, yes, they did. And, you know, we took out the notebook.
So much to
Here's
hear.
the time it
It's right. Which is why it's so important to bring someone with you to appointments like that.
It makes a big difference because you'll even say, "What he said this, I can't believe." She'd be like, "No, he didn't mean that at all."
You're not hearing all of it.
Right. So it was so helpful to have that kind of support and love around me. Not everybody has it, right? And so, you know, another area in which I was privileged in going through this, so couldn't have been more supportive. I will say there was a part of me that thought about how supportive she was. And I'm like, I hope I would be this supportive if the shoe were on the other foot. Right? I hope I would, I don't know, like her level of patience and everything else like that. I'm like, I don't think I would be this good, you know?
Maybe you'd surprise yourself.
Yeah, it could be, right? Until you're in the situation, you don't know. But I will say it helped our relationship along. There are still there were moments where we looked at each other like, so what does all this mean? What's going to happen? That kind of thing. And so you get into those moments here and there. But I was very fortunate to have somebody in my life that could deal with this, that knew a little bit about it because she's in the medical field, that came to every appointment, and there were times where I'm like, you don't have to come. We do the same thing, but you don't need to be there. It's fine. I'm coming. Right. It stopped being a
It
negotiation.
was important to her
Right.
to be there for you.
Right.
And you needed to kind of step back and allow it and understand that this is a journey for her too.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it is for caregivers. And again, the level of patience she had, I'm not sure that I would have if the shoe were on the other foot, but I was very blessed and lucky.
Yeah. That's great. Got a good one there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have an event coming up shortly, right? So could you tell us a little bit about that event? It's sounds pretty amazing. I'd like for you to kind of share with us what your goal is there, what you're doing and why, and what you're hoping to accomplish.
So one of the disheartening moments during my treatment was there's 5 floors to get up to my office at FCA. I generally take the stairs because I'm like, I got to get my steps in kind of thing. Even if I run a whole bunch of miles in the morning, I'm still like, well, I still got to take the stairs.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, that's
so. But climbing up 5 flights of stairs during treatment, I was winded. I get to the top where I'd have to stop at like 3.5, take a minute and then go back up. And I'm like, it was so demoralizing. I'm like, really? Like all the fitness I built up disappeared that quickly? How could it go that fast? It took forever to build up and then disappeared almost overnight.
Yeah.
It was tough. And so, now I'm back to walking up 5 flights of stairs without a problem and feeling good and that kind of thing. But an opportunity came up to join the NYU Langone team in a fundraiser to run up the Empire State Building, which is 86 floors. I think it's like 1,600 steps as opposed to 5 flights. And so 86 flights of
Stacey and I
stairs.
will not be doing.
So on October 8th, I am running up the Empire State Building, really as a thank you to the folks at NYU Langone who, quite frankly, saved my life. I could have, the ironic part is I know hospital CEOs across Long Island because of what I do. So I know Michael Dowling at Northwell very well. I know Pat O'Shaughnessy, who runs Catholic Health. I know Rob Sharma, who runs South Nassau. I know lots of folks in the medical space. I didn't know anyone at NYU Langone, and that's where I wound up. Yeah. The nice thing about that is I didn't need to know anybody.
It was better that you didn't.
I didn't need to make a call. And they rolled out the red carpet, and I got an impeccable care and treatment. So this is my way of giving back. So I'm doing that on October 8th, and then running the New York City Marathon in November again, kind of as my comeback race. And so I have kind of built up the calendar to prove to myself I'm back and can do these things again over the course of the next couple of months, and then we'll see what 2026 brings. I will say, lots of people are reaching out to me about the book, usually people who are newly diagnosed or have a family member who are newly diagnosed. So I'm speaking to people literally every day about cancer and their diagnosis and that kind of thing. I always say to them, because sometimes people will ask questions that I feel are medical, and I have to remind them, PhD, not MD. And the fact that I had cancer doesn't make me an oncologist. It means that I can share with you one person's experience and some things that I learned in terms of how to navigate this and how to survive it. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But it's worth looking at. So I'm talking to a lot of people about that. I will say there's the science around exercise during cancer treatments is unequivocal. Another study came out in the past week or so. I exercised through treatment, not to the same extent that I was, but I was on the Peloton regularly. I was doing indoor stuff. I continued to exercise. The days I exercised more aggressively, I just felt better emotionally, but also physically. And so my doctors encouraged it and said, look, you should do that. It gets the chemo into your body. It's a good thing to do. I felt better on the days that I exercised. And there were days when it was hard. And I just kept telling myself, the hardest thing is lacing up your sneaker. The first mile is easy. Lace up your sneakers and get outside. Take the first step. Leave the house, and then you're good.
Hard to initiate and step into it.
And you're just exhausted and shot. You're just exhausted and shot. But, I went back on the mornings when I felt nauseous. I'm like, I throw up during marathons all the time. Like I throw up during the swims on triathlons. You wipe your face off and you keep going. You literally don't give it a second thought. Those things happen.
Yep.
Your toenails fall off, you're bleeding. Those things happen. You just keep going.
Sounds wonderful.
Right.
But I think
we should get started on this.
Yes. But the whole mental attitude of that is like you throw up, you keep going. I mean, I think that has such an impact on the course and the progression of treatment because I throw up, I'm feeling sad, I'm calling Stacy crying, she's sending me soup, like I'm not getting out of bed for 2 days. Like I'm not going, well, keep rallying, keep going.
Right.
So it's, it speaks to, the positive mindset. And like you said, that's not what's going to cure cancer, but it is what's going to help you along that journey.
And I became one of those militant cancer people. So I had the F cancer shirt and everything else like that because it really helped me. And like there were times, same way I cursed the hills on a marathon, I was cursing cancer quite a bit. The terminology we use around some of this stuff is interesting. And so according to the American Cancer Society, you're a survivor as soon as you're diagnosed. But there's this whole portion of the world that says as long as you're undergoing treatment, you are a warrior, then you become a survivor. And I really, I thought a lot about the symbolism of the language and that kind of thing. And there was a part of me that loved that warrior identity, given what I do. There's another part of me, it's like, I'm not doing anything. I'm sitting in a chair while chemo does all the work. How am I a warrior?
That's not true.
It's not, but I reverted back to that. People would say to me, you're so brave going through this. And I wouldn't call them out, but I felt like saying, well, do I have a choice, right? I don't really have a choice. Like this was given to me. This is the treatment. I can curl up in a ball, I suppose. But I don't feel brave and I didn't always feel like a warrior. And I will say sometimes the use of that language felt weird. And so the friends who I've lost since I started this journey, they will say, well, they lost their battle with cancer. Well, it's not exactly a fair fight, like if we're being honest.
Right.
And it suggests that maybe they didn't fight hard enough. And if they had done something different, they would have had a different outcome, which feels a lot like blaming the victim.
Yeah.
So I really struggled with, I have a warrior shirt. Am I a warrior? Well, I don't know, because it has a flip side to it. If you think about the American Cancer Society actually has like a shield and a sword as its logo. And so that warrior mentality is built into a lot of things. And if you look at, and unless you're in the rooms, you don't notice this, but the radiation machine, pretty much everything is made by companies that also make military equipment. So it's GE, and it's like, and it kind of has that feel to it. And then then you move over to this thing called a survivor. And so the terminology like struck me as being really, really odd. And the warrior thing, I went back and forth and I'm like, yes, I'm a strong warrior and I do things. And then it was like, yeah, but suppose I don't win. Like, it's not that I'm not trying, I'm trying. And so I've become more in tune with the language and terminology that we use around these
Those are good points, right? Because words have impacts.
They do.
Right? I mean, our whole mind, they said before, mindset, isn't everything, but it's something.
Yes.
Right? And so words definitely impact our mindset. And I think it's your mindset that really helped you to get through this in a way that worked for you.
Right.
And that helped you and that really brought you into this place of survival, if we're going to call it that, right? I think that, you might look at it and say, well, what choice do I have, right? But the reality is, unfortunately, I think that there are some people out there that don't have the strength or the wherewithal or the support to fight the fight. And I think that some people mentally and emotionally do sometimes get tired and give up. And I think, like you said before, about the impact of stress on cancer. And I think that the impact of stress on survival and outcome is probably one to look at also. And I think that positive mindset can really bring somebody through this journey and come out the other side, even though it was so hard and you don't feel 100% like yourself right in the very beginning and it takes time to heal. You come out the other side and you're okay. I think it is important to have positive mindset. And so if we're going to shift language and we're going to try to kind of toss away warrior and survivor and all of that, what might be better words to use? What might be more empowering for somebody when they're going through this journey?
I don't know. And I thought a lot about that. And I just I finally settled on, and I don't love cancer survivor because it like puts the disease first, right? So I don't love that. I love person-centered language, but I haven't come up with a good term for that. And so it's just really just person with cancer, I guess.
Maybe we should just like start a culture where people just name themselves, like there's this organization. I don't know if you are familiar with them. They're called BACA. It's Bikers Against Child Abuse.
I've heard of them.
They're an amazing organization. And so they have this tendency when they bring a child into their organization, the child gives themselves their own like warrior name, their own biker name. And so, instead of their name being, Matilda, their name is going to now be like, Fierce Cheetah, right? Or whatever they decide to call themselves, Mayhem or, whatever. And they find a name that, really speaks to that strong part of them that wants to show up and say, I got this, right? So if we can kind of like, start this culture where, people who are going through the battle, right, and they're warriors, right, instead of calling themselves a warrior, to say, I am so-and-so through this battle, right? This is my name. This is my cancer fighting name.
But I wonder if everyone's going to have the same response to the language, like you even just use the word kind of going through the battle and fighting the battle. I mean, I think for some people, it's kind of an identity. I'm a warrior. I'm fighting this beast, this disease. And they might find, power in that. So I think it's all kind of, going to be personal.
Yeah. And then they should use it. But I think, to your point, people should not feel like they have to use that language if it doesn't resonate for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it's okay to say, I don't want to call myself a warrior just because, they're giving out these T-shirts at NYU Langone that says warrior. It's okay if I don't feel like a warrior. It's okay if I feel like something else. And to kind of really just name your own, experience.
Right.
To label your own experience through your own identity in your story. Regardless, I think, of what you're going through. So I think that's a good point. I do want to make sure that we have time since we're coming to an end here. This went so fast, and you've shared so many really important, I think, points that I hope are really so helpful for the people listening. Can you just, talk about where people can find your book? I want to make sure everyone's got your name, the name of the book, where they can find it. And anything else that you want to share in terms of, you mentioned people reach out to you and you talk to people and you help people. I guess share with us where people can find you, where they can find your book, all the good stuff.
Yep. The book is at all the places you would expect to find books these days. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, that kind of thing. I have a website for the book. It's called Every Mile Matters, the title of the book.com, where there's information about me, ways to get in touch with me. People shoot questions through the website all the time. So feel free to do that. And I will actually call you. There's times when I call people and I'm like, I can't believe you called me. I'm like, well, you asked me to. And so, look, if I can be helpful to folks in your audience that are going through this or have a family member going through this, I'm always happy to pick up the phone and have a quick chat. But the book is at all the major outlets. The audio book is on its way out. In fact, by the time this runs, it might actually be out. And just here's a funny anecdote. So the person who called me across the finish line in Ironman, Florida, his name is Mike Riley. He's the voice of Ironman. And when you finish, he says, Jeffrey Reynolds, you are an Ironman. And we all live for that moment. I have it on video, that kind of thing. He actually did the audiobook for me.
Oh, wow.
So we went to San Diego, spent,
really cool.
A couple days in the studio with him. And he actually is the voice on the audiobook.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so a full circle moment for him, a full circle moment for me, and just all around very, very nice.
So your title, Every Mile Matters, is that one that you chose easily? Was that like sort of like a journey trying to figure out what to call it? Did it just come to you? Because it's really a great title. I think it really speaks to everything that you're talking about. I think the last question I want to ask you with is about that. And also, you mentioned that people reach out to you and they call you and they ask you questions. So I'm wondering if there is any question that stands out for you that people tend to ask a lot that you want to just sort of answer for our audience in case anyone is listening that does have that burning question that could kind of be something to leave them with before we end?
Yeah, so I think the biggest question I get from folks that are walking alongside somebody with cancer is, I'm not sure what to say. What's the right thing to say? There is no right or wrong thing. Well, there are some wrong things to say, but there's no right thing to say. And if you don't know what to say, it's fine to say, look, I don't really know what to say right now.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry this is happening to you. I always suggest to people, don't say, what can I do to help? Because their answer will be nothing. I'm good. Right. Instead, if you want to do something, just do something.
Yes.
Right. If you want to bring dinner, bring dinner. If you want to bring me somewhere, I'd probably go kicking and screaming, but bring me somewhere. So don't say, if there's anything I could do to help, let me know. We will never get
It's easier to accept what somebody is throwing at you rather than to be pushed to ask for something.
Yep. So impose if need be. For folks who are newly diagnosed, look, take it a mile at a time. Stay off Google, talk to your doctors, write down your questions ahead of time, connect with other people who are going through this, get second and third opinions if need be, and make sure that you're really, really comfortable with the treatment plan. And then look at some coping mechanisms. The notion you could go through this and not either be in therapy or have some practice that you use to calm yourself, to level yourself, to center yourself. Find something. One of the first things my oncologist did was he started showing me meditation videos. And I'm like, hold up, you got the wrong guy. Like, I want the most powerful chemo you have. I don't want to meditate on my tumor. And that's great for other patients. I got my thing, but thank you. But this is just not me.
It's okay to have your thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the title really comes from, like, time matters and the things you do matter. There's a phrase in running called junk miles, and it's when you just kind of go out and run and you don't follow a prescribed plan. I never thought there was any such thing as junk miles, because if you're putting in the mileage, you're getting something out of that. I have a tattoo on my calf that I got after my first diagnosis that said miles to go before I sleep, with the Ironman symbol on my leg. And so it was really an homage to that, to say every mile matters. I still got plenty more in me and plenty of work to do. And my work at FCA, my work in my relationships, and my work on myself.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, this is really so helpful. And I hope that anybody that's watching or listening that knows someone or is going through it themselves can take something away from this that can, bring them into a better place. So
Awesome.
Again, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think that said, you guys know the drill. We say this every time. Please subscribe wherever you are watching or listening. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Heather's favorite, Amazon. And it helps you and it helps the podcast, because then you'll know when new episodes are coming out. So again, I am Stacy.
And I'm Heather.
And we are
Why Do People Do That?
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Why Do People Do That is recorded and produced by Press Record Studios.